All right, let's look at the expense and vendors. What would these reports give us more detail about on the financials? Typically the income statement for the expenses. So we looked at the income side. Now we're on the expense side of things. We have a similar kind of scenario on the expenses. We categorize expenses by what we paid for. In other words, I don't put the vendor typically on my expense form on the income statement. If I paid a contractor, I say I paid contractor expense. I don't say I paid Jane Smith and Joe Doe or whatever on here. If I want to get that more information, I can run reports possibly that'll give us more information on who we paid. When I pay the telephone bill, I don't say I paid Verizon expense on the income statement. I say I paid the telephone bill. Now, if I had multiple telephone bills I had to pay, Verizon, Apple, I don't know, the AT&T, then I would have to track them by vendor. And remember that you don't always have to add the vendor in order to post something to accounts payable, even if you use the bank feeds, and many people forget that they should add the vendor to give them that added level of reporting so that they can generate other reports over here tracking information by vendor if they so choose. So we have the check detail report. So these are money going out. So you would think that that's a balance sheet account, but money going out is typically for the purchase of goods and services, expenses ultimately, and therefore you would think it would fit in here. Now remember, anything dealing with a checking account, you might construct yourself in essence by going to the balance sheet, going into the checking account, and then you can sort the checking account or filter it. Let's go to switch to the modern mode up top, and then I can filter the checking account. And I can filter it by transaction type, possibly, helping me to find the increases and decreases to the checking account. But you might be able to get a summary report over here for that as well. 1099 transaction detail. Again, you got those 1099 reports that you got to deal with if you're in the United States. Purchase by product service detail. So now we can break out the purchases by the products and services, remembering that's normally dealing with inventory, because the products that we're going to put in play are inventory items. If you're not buying inventory, then you might not need this report might not be as useful. Open purchase order detail. A purchase order is a request for inventory. And note that many businesses don't have purchase orders because one, either they don't have inventory, or two, they have to pay for the inventory when they request it, similar to when we buy something from Amazon, and therefore they don't have a purchase order. It's only when you can request the inventory without paying for it, they ship it to you without you paying for it, and then you pay for it, in which case you'd have to track the purchase order, and that would be this information. Purchase order list. We've got the transaction list by vendor. So now we can take a look at the transactions broken out by who we paid. So on the income statement, we have the expenses for what we paid for by category. This now are the expenses by who we paid, right? So I'm going to close this back out. And then you would only be able to have this report, by the way, even if using bank feeds, you made sure to take the information from electronic transfers in the memo section to create the vendors, which some people don't do. And they might as well do it because you have the information most of the time. And that'll give you more detail so that you can run a report like this. So purchase by vendor detail, similar vendor contact list. This will give us all the contacts for the vendor. Many vendors, we might not have any contact information because we just put the name of Verizon, of the utility company, and so on and so forth. But particular vendors, such as those we buy inventory from, we probably want more information and contact detail about so we can communicate with them more closely. Expenses by vendor summary, similar report here.